Gripen E operates with a new agile architecture system, which allows the aircraft to be upgraded with new tactics and new capabilities seamlessly.
What if I told you the most important fighter jet story in Europe right now is not about stealth, it's about an engine? Because Sweden is quietly exploring a future where the Saab Gripen no longer depends on an American power plant.
It's larger than the CD predecessor, and although externally it looks visually similar, it's a very different beast.
And if that happens, it doesn't just change the jet, it changes who controls it. Right now, the Saab JAS-39 Gripen E flies with the American-built General Electric F414 engine.
GE's F414 engine, which is also used in the U.S. Navy's Super Hornet.
The same core family used in the Super Hornet. It's powerful, reliable, proven, but it also means every Gripen export lives inside U.S. export law. And that matters more than most people realize. Because if Sweden, possibly with European partners like Rolls-Royce, develops an alternative engine outside American control, then for the first time in decades, countries could buy a modern Western fighter jet without asking Washington for permission. That's not a technical upgrade. That's a geopolitical shift, and a handful of countries, including Canada, India, and Brazil, are watching very closely.
I figured it would only be appropriate to show everybody what's going on inside.
To understand why this engine matters so much, you need to understand what everyone thought about the Gripen before it. For decades, the US has controlled the engine that powers much of the Western fighter market. Sweden may be about to break that pattern. For nearly 4 decades, the JAS-39 Gripen occupied a specific lane in the global defense conversation. Respected, efficient, cleverly designed, good value for the money. The kind of aircraft that smaller nations with limited budgets chose because they could not afford the prestige platforms. That was the story. And for a long time, it was partially true. The original Gripen variants were outstanding performers within their category. But that category was understood, defined, contained. The Gripen was a 4th-generation fighter competing in a market increasingly dominated by 5th-generation stealth aircraft. Smart buyers chose it. Serious superpowers did not worry about it. Then Saab released the Gripen E, and the conversation changed. Not dramatically at first. The defense press covered the upgrade. Analysts noted the improvements. The new model got good reviews in the trade publications that 300,000 people read and 3 billion people ignore.
There is a that General Electronics or GE was chosen as the preferred bidder over Eurojet Turbo.
But underneath the measured professional language in those reviews was something that nobody quite wanted to state directly. The Gripen E was not the aircraft anyone expected it to be. Its engine, the American-built F414, pushed the jet to Mach 2, 2,100 kilometers per hour at altitude. Climb rate, acceleration, and high-altitude performance all significantly improved over previous versions. Combat radius extended to roughly 1,500 kilometers. Ferry range with external tanks pushed toward 4,000 kilometers. 10 hardpoints, a 27mm cannon. Weapons capacity of approximately 7,200 kilograms. Payload numbers you normally find on heavier, more expensive aircraft. Air forces that flew alongside the Gripen E in joint exercises came back with reports that surprised their own analysts, and then Sweden started working on what comes next. That is the engine nobody had fully accounted for. But here is what the aviation press is not connecting. The new engine development is not just about making the Gripen faster or longer ranged. It is about something far more strategic. Something that changes who can buy this aircraft, under what terms, and with what level of independence. And once you understand that, the reason the whole world is suddenly paying attention becomes completely clear. Every engine tells a story that has nothing to do with engineering. It tells a story about power, about who controls it, about who approves its use, its upgrades, its export, and its future. The Gripen E currently flies on the F414, manufactured by General Electric in the United States. It is a magnificent engine, battle-tested, reliable, efficient. It gave the Gripen E the performance leap that transformed the aircraft's international reputation. But it came with something attached: American export control laws. Every country that buys a Gripen E powered by the F414 enters a long-term relationship, not just with Sweden, but with Washington. Spare parts require US approval. Overhaul schedules need political clearance. Engine software updates move through American channels. Upgrade timelines are influenced by US foreign policy decisions that may have nothing to do with the aircraft, nothing to do with Sweden, and nothing to do with the country actually flying it. For close US allies, this system usually functions. The relationship is stable. The approvals come through. The supply chain operates predictably, but the world is not made entirely of close US allies. India wants to build its own defense industry. Brazil wants technology transfer, not just equipment purchases. Indonesia wants local production, skilled jobs, and a seat at the aerospace table. Across Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and parts of the Middle East, nations with growing defense budgets are looking for partners who offer capability without control. The F414 closes that door. An alternative engine, European, Asian, or built through a multinational partnership, opens it. And that is precisely why the discussions now happening around next-generation Gripen propulsion have generated attention far beyond what any engine specification normally produces. Rolls-Royce, rebuilding its military propulsion presence after years of focusing on commercial aviation, has been in conversations. European aerospace partnerships exploring next-generation fighter propulsion have overlapping interests with what Sweden needs. Asian manufacturers pursuing cooperative agreements have been making offers. The market that was once owned by a handful of Western suppliers has fractured, and the Gripen, designed from the beginning with modularity and export flexibility at its core, sits at the center of the fracture. Sweden is not just upgrading an engine, it is deciding what kind of aircraft the Gripen becomes for the next 30 years. And that decision will determine which countries can fly it, on whose terms, and with how much independence. Let us get specific about what a next-generation engine does to this aircraft's capabilities, because the strategic and political arguments only matter if the engineering supports them. The current F414 produces approximately 98 kilonewtons of thrust with afterburner. It enables the Mach 2 top speed and the Super Cruise performance, the ability to sustain supersonic flight without afterburner that has impressed pilots in every Air Force that has operated alongside it. A next-generation engine targeting the Gripen platform would need to match or exceed those numbers while also improving fuel efficiency for extended range missions, reducing thermal signature for survivability, and integrating with the aircraft's advanced electronic systems without creating new maintenance complexity. Those requirements are not science fiction. They are engineering targets that multiple development programs are actively pursuing. If those targets are met, the performance picture shifts significantly. Extended supercruise capability reducing the fuel consumption penalty of sustained supersonic flight. Improved thrust-to-weight ratio enhancing maneuverability in close-range combat. Better high-altitude performance affecting both interception capability and survivability against modern surface-to-air missile systems. But here's the part that matters most for the aircraft's global position. An engine developed outside American export control jurisdiction does not just improve performance numbers. It removes the political ceiling that currently limits who can receive, operate, and independently upgrade the aircraft. Brazil could buy Gripens and service them domestically without US approval timelines. India could integrate the aircraft into a local manufacturing ecosystem that builds toward genuine aerospace self-sufficiency. Southeast Asian nations navigating complex relationships with both Washington and Beijing could operate a modern Western fighter without the political entanglement that American engine dependency creates. The aircraft stops being a product tied to one supplier's geopolitical preferences. It becomes a platform, genuinely sovereign, genuinely transferable, genuinely competitive in markets that the F414 version cannot reach. And this is the moment where the story stops being about Sweden and starts being about the entire future of the global fighter market. Because there is a group of countries watching this development more closely than any analyst has reported. And what they decide to do in the next 5 years will reshape alliance structures, industrial partnerships, and strategic alignments in ways that most people have not begun to calculate. India has been pursuing aerospace independence for 20 years with mixed results. Its domestic fighter program has faced delays, technical challenges, and the persistent gap between industrial ambition and manufacturing reality. Its defense budget has grown substantially. Its strategic goals have grown alongside it, and India's relationship with both Washington and Moscow has become complicated enough that dependence on either country's engine technology creates genuine vulnerability. A Gripen powered by an engine without US export restrictions, potentially with Indian industrial participation in the supply chain, addresses multiple Indian strategic priorities simultaneously: modern capability, reduced dependence, industrial partnership, technology transfer, jobs in high-skilled manufacturing. Brazil tells a similar story with Brazilian characteristics. The country has a functioning aerospace industry built around Embraer, a long tradition of defense self-reliance, and a political culture that responds strongly to sovereignty arguments. It already operates Gripens. It already has the maintenance infrastructure, an engine upgrade that deepens Brazilian industrial involvement and reduces Washington's influence over operational decisions would generate serious political support domestically. Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Southeast Asian nations managing relationships with multiple great powers simultaneously represent exactly the market that a non-American engine unlocks. These countries want modern air capability. They are not interested in the geopolitical dependencies that currently come attached to it. And Canada. Canada's fighter debate has moved this question from theoretical to urgent. Canadian defense planners have spent years wrestling with the tension between military capability and sovereign control. The country's experience in the F-35 review, where Pentagon officials issued warnings about consequences for choosing a Swedish aircraft, exposed how deeply procurement decisions can compromise national independence. A Gripen powered by an engine outside American export control would change the Canadian calculation entirely. The sovereignty argument, which was powerful but incomplete while the aircraft still depended on US propulsion, becomes comprehensive. Fly American equipment or fly free. That is a choice Sweden's engine development is quietly offering, and the countries doing the math are not dismissing the offer. Here's what most defense coverage misses entirely. The engine is the headline. The industrial ecosystem is the story. When Sweden or a European partnership develops propulsion technology for the next Gripen generation, the economic consequences extend far beyond aircraft manufacturers and Air Force budgets. Engine development drives materials science. The metallurgical research required to build components that survive sustained supersonic temperatures produces advances that move into commercial aviation, energy generation, and industrial manufacturing. Countries that host engine development programs gain knowledge assets that compound across decades. Engine production drives precision manufacturing. The machining tolerances required for modern turbine components establish industrial capabilities that anchor high-skill employment for generations. Countries that build engine components do not just create defense jobs, they build the foundation for advanced manufacturing ecosystems. Engine maintenance drives workforce development. Long-term sustainment programs train engineers, technicians, and program managers at a level that civilian industry absorbs productively. Defense engine programs have historically been among the most effective mechanisms for building sophisticated technical workforces. When Saab structures its export offers around technology transfer and local production participation, it is offering all of this simultaneously, not just an aircraft, an industrial development program wrapped in national security packaging. For governments trying to explain a defense purchase to voters who want to know what their money is buying domestically, that packaging matters enormously. The countries most likely to choose the next generation Gripen are not simply choosing an aircraft, they are choosing an industrial trajectory. And Sweden, by pursuing engine development outside American export control, is making that trajectory available to a far wider range of countries than currently exists. So here is where all of this lands. Because we are not talking about a future possibility or a theoretical development. The decisions being made right now, in Stockholm, in Brussels, in Ottawa, in New Delhi, will determine whether this engine becomes one of the most strategically significant aerospace developments of the decade. And the window for those decisions is narrower than most people realize. An engine is never just an engine. That is the thread running through everything we have covered. The thrust numbers matter, the performance data matters, the technical specifications matter, but they are not the reason the world is watching Sweden's propulsion development with an intensity that goes far beyond normal aerospace interest. The reason is what the engine represents. For 30 years, the global fighter market has operated inside a framework where American engine technology functions as a long-term strategic anchor. Countries that adopt it enter relationships that last decades. Upgrade cycles, spare parts, software updates, export approvals, all of it flows through channels that Washington controls. That framework served real purposes. It built interoperability, it created aligned supply chains, it tied defense relationships together in ways that strengthened collective security. But it also created dependencies that some nations increasingly find incompatible with genuine sovereignty. Sweden noticed, Sweden built accordingly, and now Sweden is developing the propulsion technology that could complete the picture the Gripen started, an aircraft designed for independence, flown from highways and forest clearings, maintained by small teams with minimal infrastructure, owned fully by the nation operating it, powered potentially by an engine that answers to no foreign government. The countries watching this development most closely are not the ones who already have everything they need. They are the ones who have been waiting patiently, strategically, sometimes for decades, for a credible alternative to permanent dependence. Sweden's new engine is not just a performance upgrade, it is an answer. And the question it answers, who controls your Air Force when it matters most, is the most important question in modern defense. The world is paying attention because the world already knows what is at stake. Sweden just proved it knows too. If you really enjoyed, click that subscribe and see you in the next one. And